I stood there, frozen, holding the tray of half-eaten breakfast. My hands trembled as I watched Mrs. Hart, no, Mom, as she forced me to call her, whisper something to her husband. Mr. Hart's eyes darkened as he glanced toward the hallway. "She heard it," he said coldly. "We have to do something about that." I wasn't supposed to hear what they said. I wasn't supposed to know the truth behind the locked basement door. But I did. I had just taken out the trash when I saw Mr. Hart talking to a man in a suit with a briefcase. He handed the man an envelope. "This is the last of it," he whispered. "If anyone finds out what we did in '98, we're finished." I didn't even know what '98 meant. I was born in 2006. But something inside me said, keep listening. Before I dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps more people hear stories like this. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends because everything changed after that moment. I was 7 when the Harts adopted me. My real mom had passed away in a fire. I remember the smoke, the flames, and the social worker's hand on my shoulder telling me I'd be safe now. I believed her. I really did. The Harts had a huge house in the countryside. It looked like something out of a magazine. When they first brought me home, I thought I was lucky. Mrs. Hart smiled at me with this warm look that felt like sunshine. She brushed my hair and told me to call her Mom. But that warmth disappeared within the first month. It started with chores. Innocent at first. Sweep the floor, do the dishes, make your bed. But soon, it became everything. I cleaned the entire house before school. I cooked dinner after school. I wasn't allowed to eat with them. I had to wait in the kitchen and eat the leftovers. If I sat on the couch, I was yelled at. If I accidentally watched the TV, I was sent to my room. They had 2 biological daughters, Emma and Gracie. Emma was only 2 years older than me, but they treated her like royalty. Gracie, the youngest, got everything she wanted. Dolls, dresses, attention. I got nothing, not even hugs. One night, I heard Emma tell Gracie, "She's not our real sister. She's just here to clean." They didn't know I was awake. I cried quietly into my pillow, trying not to make a sound. But what broke me wasn't the chores. It wasn't even the neglect. It was the punishment room. One evening, I broke a plate. It slipped from my hand. I said sorry 100 times. But Mr. Hart grabbed my arm and yanked me down to the basement. He opened a small room with no windows, just cement walls and a single light bulb. He threw me inside. "You'll stay here until you learn to respect this house," he snapped. I was 9. I sat in the cold room for 10 hours. No food, no water, just darkness. I remember whispering to myself, "You're not weak. You're not weak. You'll get out someday." And I meant it. Years passed. I became quiet, obedient. But inside, I was planning, watching, listening. When I turned 16, things started to shift. Mrs. Hart began locking certain doors. Mr. Hart would leave late at night and come back before dawn. They'd speak in hushed tones when they thought I wasn't listening. Once, I found a stack of old letters in the trash. Most were torn, but one had a name I recognized from the news, Dr. Halwin. He was arrested for something horrible, but the details were buried. Why would the Harts have a letter from him? And then I found the black folder. I wasn't snooping, not really. I was just cleaning the office when the file fell behind the drawer. I pulled it out, and what I saw made my heart drop. Photos, legal documents, court papers. One of them had the name Annalise Green, my real mother. The headline said, "Fire ruled accidental. Mother leaves behind infant." But the handwriting on the file, Mrs. Hart's handwriting, said something else. "Too risky. Pay off the coroner. Make it disappear." I stared at those words, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. What did they mean, make it disappear? Did they have something to do with my mother's death? That's when the door creaked. Mr. Hart stood there. His eyes landed on the folder in my hands. His voice dropped to a growl. "You weren't supposed to see that?" I ran. I didn't stop running until I was in the woods behind the house. I stayed hidden for hours. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until the lights were out and snuck back into the house through the cellar door. I needed answers. Real answers. So I went back to the office. The folder was gone. But I found something else. An old VHS tape marked Home Footage 1998. I snuck it into the small player in the guest room. The screen flickered. Static. Then, a woman. My mom. Alive. Holding me as a baby. Smiling. Then the camera turned. Mr. Hart's voice. "This is the one. We'll take her." Mrs. Hart. "Are you sure no one will find out?" Mr. Hart. "We already made sure the paperwork disappears. She's ours now." The screen went black. I couldn't breathe. My hands were ice. That's when it all clicked. They didn't adopt me out of kindness. They stole me, lied, covered up something, maybe even hurt my mother. I had to know more. I had to make them pay. But just as I took out the tape to hide it, I heard the front door slam. "Ella, where are you?" It was Mrs. Hart. I froze. I was holding the tape, the last piece of proof, and they were coming. I didn't move. I couldn't. Mrs. Hart's voice echoed through the house. "Ella, don't make me come looking for you." My fingers clenched tighter around the VHS tape. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I looked around the guest room. No closet, no window, no way out except the door she was walking toward. Footsteps. Getting closer. I shoved the tape under the mattress and crouched behind the small armchair. My legs felt numb, but my mind was sprinting. If she saw me in here, if she knew I'd seen the video... The door creaked open. Her shoes tapped slowly on the wooden floor. "I know you were in the office." The drawer was open. She muttered to herself. "Where did you go, you little thief?" She checked under the bed. "Please don't touch the mattress." But she didn't. After a long pause, she sighed and stormed back out. I didn't breathe until the sound of her heels disappeared down the hallway. I stayed hidden another 30 minutes just to be sure. When I finally crawled out, my entire body was trembling. I grabbed the tape, wrapped it in a scarf, and tucked it into the hollow under my bed. The same spot I used to hide the cookies I wasn't allowed to eat. I needed help. Proof wasn't enough if I had no one to believe me. So I turned to the only person outside the family who might listen. My chemistry teacher, Mrs. Lyle. She was the one person who ever looked at me like I was more than just the adopted girl. During lunch breaks, she'd ask me about my reading. She once gave me an old copy of Jane Eyre and said, "You remind me of her. Strong but quiet. Brave even when no one sees it." The next morning, I took the tape to school. I wrapped it in a hoodie and waited until class ended. As everyone filed out, I walked up to her desk. "Mrs. Lyle," I whispered, "can I talk to you after school? It's really important." She smiled, but it faded when she saw the fear in my face. "Of course. Meet me in the library. 3:15. All day, I counted the minutes. Every glance over my shoulder made me flinch. What if Mr. Hart called the school? What if they found out I took the tape? At exactly 3:15, I met her in the corner of the library. I handed her the tape with shaking hands. "What is it?" she asked softly. I whispered, "I think it proves my adoptive parents. They didn't adopt me legally. I think they hurt my real mom." She stared at the tape like it was a snake about to bite her. "Ella, do you know how serious this is?" "Yes," I said, voice trembling. "That's why I need help. I don't know who else to go to." She took a long breath, nodded slowly, and slipped the tape into her tote bag. "I'll watch it tonight," she said. "And if what you're saying is true, we'll go to the police tomorrow." For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope, but it didn't last long. That night, I got home late, intentionally. I hoped Mr. and Mrs. Hart would be asleep. but as I stepped through the door, the living room lights clicked on. They were waiting. Mr. Hart stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Mrs. Hart sat stiffly on the couch with a glass of wine and a fake smile. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice too calm. "I stayed after school to study." "With who?" "Mrs. Lyle," I said. Wrong answer. Mrs. Hart's eyes narrowed. "She always liked you too much." Mr. Hart stepped closer. "Did you take something from my office?" "No." "Don't lie, Ella," he snapped. "There was a tape. I know you found it." I stayed silent. "Do you think you're smart?" he said, voice rising. "You think you can ruin this family?" That word made my blood boil. Family. What kind of family locks you in basements and steals your life? But I held my tongue. Mr. Hart grabbed my arm. "We'll deal with this tomorrow," he growled. "Get to your room. Now." I walked upstairs slowly, refusing to cry. But once the door shut, I locked it. I pushed a chair under the handle. I sat on the bed and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, just one more day." The next morning, I got to school early. Mrs. Lyle wasn't in class. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, no sign of her. Then the principal came over the loudspeaker. "Students, we are sad to announce that Mrs. Lyle has had a sudden medical emergency and won't be returning for the rest of the term." My mouth went dry. Medical emergency? No one knew what happened. Some students said she collapsed in the parking lot. Others whispered about a car crash. But none of it made sense. Until I saw Mr. Hart's car parked near the staff entrance that morning. And I knew. They got to her. The only person who had the tape. The only one who believed me. Gone. That afternoon, I walked home in a daze. My feet felt heavy. My brain kept looping one sentence. "You're on your own now." At home, the Harts acted normal. Sickeningly normal. Mrs. Hart made lasagna. Mr. Hart offered to drive me to the mall. Emma bragged about some award. Gracie asked to borrow my jacket. I sat at the table and said nothing. But that night, I made a decision. They wanted to play games? Fine. So would I. I waited 2 weeks, pretended everything was back to normal, smiled, cleaned, did every chore without complaint. But every night, I stayed up researching. Who was Dr. Hulwin? What happened in 1998? And most importantly, how did a woman named Annalise Green die in a fire when there were signs she had been trying to get custody of her daughter? I found an old newspaper archive online. There were only 3 articles. One said she had petitioned the court for emergency custody days before she died. The other 2 were redacted, blacked out, but in the comments section of one of the articles, someone had posted a single sentence. "Look into the Greenfield Children's Home. Start there." Greenfield was 40 minutes away by bus. I told the Harts I had weekend tutoring and left early Saturday morning. When I got to the old building, it was falling apart, closed down. But an old groundskeeper still lived in a trailer next door. I told him I was researching family history. He narrowed his eyes, then said something I'll never forget. "You don't look like them, but you've got her eyes. Annalise used to volunteer here." He invited me inside, told me she was trying to adopt a girl named Mara before she died, said she visited every week, brought toys, wrote letters, fought the courts for custody. But one day she stopped coming. Then the news came she died in a fire. He paused and said, "But I always wondered, because a man and woman showed up just days before. Real fancy. Drove a black sedan. Took Mara. No court order. Just took her." I felt my heart stop. "Did the girl's name start with an E?" I asked. "Ella?" He froze, then nodded. My stomach flipped. It was me. Back at home, I started gathering evidence, secretly recording their conversations, photographing documents. I even found an old receipt in the attic, dated 2 days after my mom's death, for a cash donation made to a private investigator. Piece by piece, the truth was forming. They didn't just take me. They planned it. But the real crack happened one night when Emma left her laptop open. I wasn't snooping, not exactly. I just saw a folder on her desktop labeled Legal Dad, and something in me couldn't resist. Inside were scanned copies of emails, one from Mr. Hart to an unknown address. If she ever finds out, we're all done. No more loose ends, just like we did with Annalise. That was it. Proof. I copied the files onto a flash drive. I hid it inside the one place I knew they'd never look inside, the old floor vent under my bed. And just as I closed the vent, bang! My door flew open. Mrs. Hart stood there, her eyes locked on my hands. "What are you hiding?" Mrs. Hart's voice sliced through the silence like a razor. I said, "What are you hiding, Ella?" My heart felt like it was trying to leap out of my throat. I froze, hands still pressed against the floor vent, body turned just enough to shield what I had done. But I knew she saw something, knew I had only seconds before she crossed the room. I grabbed the small screwdriver I had used to open the vent and slipped it into my sleeve. I was just cleaning," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "The vent's been rattling. I thought it was loose." She took a step forward. Her eyes weren't angry. They were calculating. "Cleaning," she repeated slowly. Then her gaze flicked to the screwdriver in my sleeve. "That's not yours." I shook my head. "It's from the kitchen drawer. Enough." She snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "Stand up." I stood, the floor creaking under my weight. My hands were clammy. My knees shook. I tried to look like a confused teenager, not a girl who'd just hidden a flash drive filled with damning evidence of a kidnapping. She looked down at the vent, then at me. "You've been acting strange lately." "I'm just tired." She stared at me long and hard. Then, in a voice so calm it made my skin crawl, she said, "You're not tired. You're digging." I swallowed hard. "You think I don't see it?" She continued. "I know every step you take in this house, every time you pick up your phone, every time you hesitate when I speak. I tried not to look at the vent. I tried not to blink. I just stood there and listened as she circled me like a vulture. Then she leaned in and whispered, 'If you keep digging, you won't like what you find. You think you're brave, but you don't know who you're dealing with, Ella. We've done this before.'" She smiled and walked out. I didn't move for 10 whole minutes. Just stood there, frozen, listening for footsteps, for creaks, for anything that might mean she hadn't left. But eventually, I heard the sound of dishes in the kitchen and soft laughter from Gracie's room. She was gone. For now. I dropped to my knees and opened the vent again. The flash drive was still there. Safe. But now I knew. They were watching me. And worse, they weren't afraid. The next day at school, I stayed behind in the computer lab after hours. I told the librarian I needed to finish a project. She didn't question it. I booted up a terminal in the far corner of the room and plugged in the drive. It held everything I had seen on Emma's laptop, and more. Court orders that had never been submitted. Social worker emails altered and backdated. A scanned newspaper clipping with a big red circle around my mom's name and the words, "Remove her, too curious," written in bold black ink. And then an audio file. I clicked it. Mr. Hart's voice came through, muffled and raspy. The girl was never supposed to survive the fire. If she hadn't crawled out... Static. Then Mrs. Hart. "She won't be a problem. She's too scared to talk. She doesn't even remember who she is." More static. Then silence. I didn't realize I was crying until a drop hit the keyboard. That was it. That was the truth. They hadn't saved me. They'd burned my world down and stolen what was left. I saved the audio and files under a fake project folder. I emailed everything to a burner Gmail account I had created at the library 2 weeks earlier. Then I deleted every trace from the computer. As I left the school building, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. But control doesn't last long when you're fighting monsters. That night, Mr. Hart knocked on my bedroom door. When I opened it, he was holding my phone. My heart dropped. "I saw your email notification," he said quietly. "You're not as clever as you think, Ella." I stared at him, trying to read how much he knew. He held up the phone. "What's green light opus?" It was the audio file. I reached for the phone, but he pulled it back. "You recorded us?" "You left the laptop open," I said. "So you admit it." "You admitted it first." His eyes darkened. "That's fine," he said softly. "That's fine. It's all been a misunderstanding, really. Come downstairs. We'll talk about it with your mother." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "You are," he said, stepping into my room. "Because I said so." He reached out to grab my arm. I stepped back and screamed, so loud it shook the window. Gracie opened her door. Emma followed. Mrs. Hart came running. "Stop it!" I shouted. "Get away from me!" Mr. Hart froze. Mrs. Hart looked stunned, but only for a second. Then she turned to her daughters and snapped, "Go to your rooms, now!" They hesitated. "I said go!" They scattered. Then she turned to me, voice low and cold. "You want to embarrass us? After everything we've done for you?" "You kidnapped me," I said. "You burned my mother alive." Her face didn't change. "Prove it." The next morning, my phone was gone. Every charger, every USB cable, my school bag, gone. I wasn't allowed to leave the house, not even for school. They told the school I was sick indefinitely, and for 3 days I was a prisoner again, but they didn't know about the backup. They didn't know that the night I emailed the files, I also mailed a printed copy of everything to the State Child Protection Office and to a woman named Detective Serena Knox. She had investigated the Greenfield home 20 years ago. I found her name on an archived press release from 2001. Retired. Still lived in the same town. Still listed in the phone book. She called me 2 days later from a blocked number. "Is this Ella Green?" I froze. I hadn't heard my real name in 10 years. "Yes," I whispered. "This is Detective Knox. I got your package." My breath caught in my throat. "Ella," she said gently, "I believe you. I've been waiting 20 years for someone like you to come forward." She said she was driving in that night. She told me not to tell anyone. She told me to stay calm. But I didn't get the chance, because someone else got to the mailbox first. Mr. Hart. That night, dinner was unusually quiet. Mr. Hart kept smiling. Mrs. Hart offered me seconds. Emma and Gracie acted like everything was normal, until dessert. Mr. Hart set down his spoon and looked at me. "You know, I opened a strange letter today," he said. My blood turned to ice. It was addressed to someone named Detective Knox, but the return address had our mailbox number. Imagine that. He looked me dead in the eyes. "Ella, do you know anything about that?" I said nothing. He leaned forward. "Because if you do, it would be very bad. For you." I clenched my fists under the table. Then Mrs. Hart smiled and said, "Why don't you come downstairs after dinner, honey? Your father wants to show you something." I knew what that meant. The basement. Again. As they cleaned the table, I slipped quietly upstairs and locked the door. I pushed the dresser in front of it, then I opened the vent and pulled out the second flash drive. The last one. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't go down that basement again. Not without a fight. That's when I heard the sirens. At first faint, then closer. Then, right outside our house. Flashing red and blue lights poured through my window. Someone knocked on the front door, and Mr. Hart answered it. Detective Knox's voice rang through the hallway like a hammer. "Mr. Hart, we need to speak with your entire family, now." I peeked out my window. There were 3 patrol cars. They weren't just here to talk. They were here to end this. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, Gracie screamed. I turned to see her pointing at the bookshelf. Smoke, thick, gray, rising from the wall outlet. Within seconds, the fire alarm began blaring. Mr. Hart shouted, Everyone out! Mrs. Hart shrieked. Flames began crawling up the curtains like fingers. They were burning the evidence. Again, just like before. Only this time, I wasn't the one trapped. Smoke filled the hallway so fast it felt like time had snapped in half. Alarms screamed. Gracie ran downstairs coughing. Emma was shouting, "The wall's on fire!" But I didn't move, because for once, they were the ones trapped in their own chaos. Mr. Hart tried to play it cool. I heard him yell to the officers, "It's just a small electrical thing. We'll handle it." But Detective Knox wasn't here to be fooled. She pushed past him with 2 officers at her side. "Get the children out of this house, now." "I'm not going anywhere," I said as I stepped down the stairs, flash drive in hand. Detective Knox's eyes met mine. "Ella Green?" I nodded. She looked over at the officers. "That's her. Protect her." And just like that, I was no longer alone. They evacuated us outside as the smoke crawled up the roof. The fire trucks arrived seconds later. Neighbors stood on their lawns, pointing, filming, whispering. The mask had fallen. The perfect Hart family, with their big house and bright smiles, was now standing on their front lawn while cops ripped apart their lives piece by piece. I watched as the firemen doused the office window. Detective Knox leaned close and asked, "Do you still have the recordings?" I opened my palm and showed her the flash drive. "Everything's on here. Every file, every audio, every photo." Her expression didn't change much, but her voice softened. "You're a very brave girl." She turned to the officers and handed them the drive. "Tag this. Protect it. It's our whole case." Mr. Hart snapped. "She's lying. She's an ungrateful, disturbed child. She's been trying to destroy us for years." Detective Knox cut him off. "You'll have your chance to talk. At the station." Mrs. Hart screamed, "You can't do this to us. She's nothing. We saved her." I finally spoke. My voice didn't shake this time. "You didn't save me. You stole me." And for the first time in my life, they were the ones with no power. At the station, everything moved fast. The officers took my full statement. The files and audio were backed up immediately. Within hours, warrants were issued. Investigators went back to the property. That night, they dug up a locked chest from under the basement floor. Inside, more letters, cash bundles, fake IDs, even court documents with missing seals stolen from a social worker who vanished in 1999. Every piece of their empire was built on lies and fear, and it was finally collapsing. The next morning, the news broke across every major channel. Couple arrested in connection with cold case child abduction. Adopted girl uncovers decades-old conspiracy. My face wasn't shown, but my voice played over the audio clip. They took my mom from me, then they tried to erase her, but they couldn't erase the truth. Detective Knox stayed with me through it all. She told me, "We missed it back then. We failed your mother. But you just exposed everything they buried." When she handed me an envelope days later, I opened it with shaky hands. Inside was a letter from my real mom. It was dated 3 weeks before she died. It had never been delivered. "Ella, if you're reading this, then somehow you found me. Or maybe I found a way to reach you. You are everything good that came from a dark place. And no matter what anyone tells you, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are mine. If I don't make it to hold your hand again, promise me this: never let them take your light. Never forget who you are." I read that letter 100 times. It felt like hearing her heartbeat again. A few months later, the trial began. I sat in the courtroom behind bulletproof glass, watching them in cuffs. They didn't look powerful anymore. They looked like what they truly were: small, cornered, exposed. The judge's words still ring in my head. For the unlawful adoption, the abuse, the obstruction of justice, and the conspiracy to falsify legal documents, this court finds you both guilty. 35 years, each. No parole. Emma and Gracie? They were sent to foster homes. Social services interviewed them separately. Turns out they knew bits and pieces, but had been manipulated too. They weren't innocent, but they were victims of a different kind. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them. But I don't hate them either, because I finally understand something. They were raised in a lie, but I rose out of one. As for me, I was finally able to take back my real name, Ella Green. And for the first time in my life, I was asked what I wanted. I asked for space. I asked for therapy. I asked to visit my mom's grave. Detective Knox came with me. We stood quietly under a blooming cherry tree while I placed the letter back into the ground right above her headstone. "I made it, Mom," I whispered. "They'll never hurt anyone again." And I meant it. A year later, I was accepted into a pre-law program. I want to be the kind of person who never turns away from the truth, the kind of person my mom would have been proud of, because no matter how dark their secrets were, they underestimated one thing. The fire didn't destroy me. It forged me.